Judge Elizabeth Sterling adjusted her black robes as she settled into her chair behind the polished wooden bench. The London courthouse buzzed with quiet activity this Tuesday morning. People filled the rows of seats, waiting nervously for their cases to be called. Elizabeth had been doing this job for 15 years, and she took great pride in keeping her courtroom running smoothly. Her grey hair was pulled back neatly, and her serious expression showed everyone that she meant business. She believed in following rules and keeping order. That was how justice worked, she thought. "Next case, please," Elizabeth called out, putting on her reading glasses to look at the papers in front of her. The court clerk stood up and announced in a clear voice, "Emma Johnson versus the City of London. Traffic violation." A young woman walked slowly toward the front of the courtroom. Emma Johnson looked to be in her late 20s. Her dark skin glowed softly under the courtroom lights, but her face showed worry and fear. She wore a simple blue dress that looked like her best outfit, though it was clearly old and worn. Her handbag was small and had seen better days. Emma's hands shook slightly as she placed her papers on the wooden table. She had been dreading this day for weeks. The speeding ticket she received 3 weeks ago was going to cost money she simply did not have. As a single mother raising her 8-year-old daughter Lucy, every penny counted. She worked 2 jobs just to pay for rent, food, and Lucy's school supplies. But today, something else was making Emma even more nervous than usual. She kept glancing at her phone, waiting for an important call that could change everything. Judge Sterling looked over her paperwork and began speaking in her official voice. "Miss Johnson, you were caught driving 15 miles per hour over the speed limit on Westminster Bridge. How do you plead to this charge?" Emma opened her mouth to speak. "Your Honor, she began. But suddenly her phone started buzzing loudly in her handbag. The sound echoed through the quiet courtroom. Emma's face went red with embarrassment. She quickly looked at her phone and saw the name on the screen. Her heart started beating faster. This was the call she had been waiting for all morning. Judge Sterling's eyebrows came together in a frown. Her voice was stern as she spoke. "Miss Johnson, please turn off your phone immediately. We are in the middle of court proceedings, and this is completely inappropriate." Emma looked up at the judge with panic in her eyes. "I'm so sorry. Your Honor, I plead guilty to the speeding charge. But I really need to explain why I was." The phone buzzed again, even louder this time. Emma's hands trembled as she looked at the caller ID. It showed Detective Thompson from Scotland Yard. This was the call that could save someone's life. But how could she explain that to the angry judge? Judge Sterling's voice became sharp and cold. "Miss Johnson, I just asked you to turn off that phone. This behavior is highly disrespectful to this court and to everyone here." Tears began to fill Emma's eyes. She knew how this looked to everyone in the courtroom, but they did not understand how important this call was. "Please, Your Honor, this is really very important. If you could just give me one moment to explain." "No explanations," Judge Sterling interrupted, her voice getting louder. "I have heard every excuse in the book. Miss Johnson, you broke the speed limit. You got caught, and now you pay the fine. It is that simple. There are no special circumstances that excuse breaking the law." The phone rang a third time. Emma knew she should not answer it, but she also knew that Detective Thompson would not keep calling unless it was urgent. Without thinking clearly, she picked up the phone and whispered into it. "Hello." "Yes, this is Emma." Judge Sterling's face turned red with anger. She grabbed her wood and gavel and slammed it down hard on the bench. The loud bang made everyone in the courtroom jump. "That is enough," she shouted. "Miss Johnson, you have shown complete contempt for this courtroom. Not only are you guilty of speeding, but you have also disrupted these proceedings with your phone calls. Emma quickly hung up the phone, but it was too late. Tears were now streaming down her face as she looked up at the furious judge. "Your Honor, please, I was just trying to. I do not want to hear it," Judge Sterling said, her voice cold as ice. "The standard fine for your speeding violation is £60. However, because of your disrespectful behavior in my courtroom today, I'm adding additional court costs. Your total fine is £200, to be paid within 30 days. Emma felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. £200 was nearly half of what she earned in a month. How would she pay rent? How would she buy food for Lucy? Your Honor, I cannot afford. That is not my concern. Miss Johnson." Judge Sterling cut her off. "Perhaps next time you will think twice before breaking the law and showing such disrespect in my courtroom." Next case, Emma gathered her papers with shaking hands and walked toward the exit. She felt humiliated and desperate. The other people in the courtroom stared at her as she passed. She could hear them whispering about the woman who had been so rude to the judge. Judge Sterling watched Emma leave and felt satisfied that she had maintained proper order in her courtroom. She had no patience for people who could not follow simple rules and show basic respect. As Emma walked through the courthouse doors into the grey London morning, neither woman knew that this encounter would soon reveal a truth that would change both of their lives forever. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Judge Sterling's private office. She sat at a large wooden desk, surrounded by stacks of legal papers and case files. The quiet room was her sanctuary, where she could think clearly and prepare for upcoming cases. Elizabeth had just finished reviewing a complicated property dispute when she heard a soft knock on her door. She looked up from her papers and called out, "Come in." The door opened slowly, and a tall man in a dark suit stepped inside. Detective Inspector James Thompson was in his 40s. With graying hair and kind eyes that seemed to see everything, his face looked very serious today. "More serious than usual, Your Honor. I need to speak with you about a very important matter," he said quietly, closing the door behind him. He walked across the room and sat down in the leather chair across from her desk. Elizabeth set down her pen and gave him her full attention. She had worked with Detective Thompson many times over the years, and she knew he would not interrupt her unless it was truly urgent. "What can I help you with, Inspector?" she asked, noticing the worried look in his eyes. Detective Thompson took a deep breath before speaking. "We have been investigating threats against several judges in London, including yourself. We have good reason to believe that someone is planning to harm you." Elizabeth felt her heart skip a beat. The blood drained from her face as she processed what he had just said. What kind of threats are we talking about? "We have received information about a man named William Carter who has been making very dangerous statements about judges. He has been particularly focused on you, Your Honor. Our investigation shows that he may be planning some kind of attack." Elizabeth's hands began to tremble slightly. In all her years as a judge, she had never faced anything like this. "How did you learn about this threat?" Detective Thompson opened a small notebook and flipped through several pages. "We have a witness who came forward with crucial information. She saw Carter near the courthouse several times over the past few weeks. He was taking photographs of the building and making notes. She also overheard him talking on his phone about making judges pay for what he called unfair treatment." "Who is this witness?" Elizabeth asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Her name is Emma Johnson. She works as a cleaner in the office building directly across from the courthouse in the evenings. She was very brave to come forward with this information, especially since Carter seemed to notice her watching him." Elizabeth felt as if someone had punched her in the stomach. The room seemed to spin round her as she tried to process what she had just heard. "Did you say Emma Johnson?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you know her?" Elizabeth's voice was shaky as she answered. I sentenced her this morning. She was in my courtroom for a traffic violation." Detective Thompson looked confused and surprised. "That is very strange. She was supposed to meet with me this morning to go over her testimony, but she told me she had to be in court first." She seemed very nervous about the whole situation. Elizabeth's hands began to shake as all the pieces started to fall into place. The phone calls that had made her so angry suddenly made perfect sense. "Inspector, what time were you supposed to meet with Miss Johnson?" "We had arranged to meet at 10:30 this morning. She said she had court at 10 and hoped to be finished by then so she could come straight to the police station." Elizabeth looked at her court schedule, even though she already knew the answer. Emma's case had been heard at exactly 10:15. The phone calls that had interrupted the court proceedings were from Detective Thompson himself. "Inspector, Miss Johnson was trying to answer your calls during her court appearance. I thought she was being disrespectful to the court. I fined her £200 because of it." Detective Thompson's face showed deep concern. "Your Honor, Emma Johnson is risking her own safety to help us protect you. She is a single mother who works 2 jobs to support her daughter. She was terrified about coming forward, but she felt it was her duty as a citizen." Elizabeth felt sick to her stomach. She had completely misjudged Emma. The young woman had not been disrespectful at all. She had been trying to help save the judge's life while dealing with her own fear and worry about testifying against. "Dear dangerous man. Inspector, what else can you tell me about Miss Johnson?" "She is studying to become a nurse while working 2 jobs to support herself and her daughter. She volunteers at a local community center teaching children to read. Everyone who knows her says she is one of the kindest, most honest people they have ever met." Elizabeth put her head in her hands and closed her eyes. She felt ashamed and horrified at what she had done. "I have made a terrible mistake." Detective Thompson leaned forward in his chair. "What do you mean?" "Your Honor, I judged her without knowing her situation. I was so focused on maintaining order in my courtroom that I did not see she was trying to help. I fined her money she probably does not have for trying to do the right thing. Your Honor, Emma never mentioned the fine to us, even after what happened in court this morning. She still insisted on meeting with us this afternoon to give her complete statement." Elizabeth looked up at him with surprise. "She is still willing to testify?" "Yes, Your Honor. She said that what she witnessed was too important to let her personal problems get in the way. She wants to make sure you stay safe." Elizabeth realized that Emma Johnson had shown more integrity and courage than she herself had displayed in her own courtroom that morning. That evening, Judge Sterling sat in a large, comfortable home in Chelsea. The house was quiet and peaceful, with expensive furniture and beautiful paintings on the walls. She had always felt content here after long days at the courthouse, but tonight was different. She could not stop thinking about Emma Johnson. Elizabeth had always believed she was a fair and just judge. She took pride in treating everyone equally under the law. But today, she had failed completely. She had judged a woman without understanding her situation, and now she felt terrible about it. She tried to read a book, but the words blurred together on the page. She tried to watch television, but she could not focus on anything. Her mind kept going back to Emma's face when she announced the £200 fine. The look of despair in the young woman's eyes haunted her. Unable to sit still any longer, Elizabeth decided she needed to learn more about the woman she had so wrongly judged. She went to her computer and looked up Emma's address in the court records. Then she put on her coat and drove through the quiet London streets. Bermondsey was a working-class neighborhood that Elizabeth rarely visited. The buildings were older and smaller than in her part of the city. The streets were narrower, and many of the shops had their lights turned off for the night. Emma lived in a small flat in a modest brick building. Elizabeth parked her car across the street and looked up at the lighted windows. Through one of them, she could see Emma sitting at a tiny kitchen table, helping a young girl with her homework. The little girl must be Lucy, Elizabeth thought. The flat looked very small but clean and cozy. Elizabeth could see books stacked on shelves and children's drawings taped to the refrigerator. Even from outside, she could tell this was a home filled with love. Even if it did not have much money, daughter Elizabeth watched as Emma patiently helped Lucy with her reading. The little girl pointed at words in her book, and Emma smiled encouragingly. They looked so peaceful together, and Elizabeth felt ashamed that her harsh fine would make their lives even more difficult. Daughter Elizabeth did not knock on the door. She was not ready for that conversation yet. Instead, she drove to the community center where Detective Thompson had mentioned Emma volunteered. The center was busy with evening activities. Children were playing basketball in the gym, and Elizabeth could hear laughter coming from different rooms. She found the main office and asked to speak with the director. A friendly woman named Margaret came to meet her. She was in her 50s with grey hair and a warm smile. Emma Johnson. Margaret's face lit up when Elizabeth asked about her. Oh, she is absolutely wonderful. She comes here every Tuesday and Thursday evening to help children with reading. She has been doing it for 2 years now, ever since her daughter Lucy started school. What can you tell me about her? Elizabeth asked, trying to keep her voice casual. She is one of the most dedicated volunteers we have ever had, Margaret said with enthusiasm. She works at a hotel during the day cleaning rooms, then works at an office building in the evenings, but she still makes time to help these children. Many of them look up to her like a big sister. Margaret led Elizabeth down a hallway to a small classroom. The walls were covered with thank you cards from children Emma had helped. There were colorful drawings and notes written in childish handwriting. Emma is studying to be a nurse. Margaret continued as they walked. She takes online classes late at night after her daughter goes to bed. I honestly do not know how she manages everything, but she never complains about being tired. Elizabeth picked up one of the thank you cards from a bulletin board. It was written in crayon by a child who could not have been more than 7 years old. Thank you, Emma, for helping me read. Now I can read stories to my little brother. Elizabeth's heart felt heavy as she read the simple words. This was the woman she had treated so harshly in court. Has she mentioned any troubles recently? Elizabeth asked carefully. Margaret's face grew concerned. She seemed very worried about something this week. She said she had to do something important, but was scared. She did not want to talk about it, but I could tell it was keeping her up at night. Elizabeth realized that Emma had been losing sleep over her decision to come forward as a witness. She had been afraid of the dangerous man she had seen, but she had done the right thing anyway. There is something else, Margaret added quietly. Emma's daughter Lucy has been having problems at school. Some children have been making fun of her clothes and shoes because they're old and worn. Emma has been saving money to buy Lucy new things, but it has been very difficult. Elizabeth felt her heart break. The £200 fine she had imposed would make Emma's already difficult situation even worse. It would mean less food on the table and no new clothes for Lucy. As Elizabeth drove home through the dark streets, she thought about her own privileged life. She had never had to choose between paying a fine and buying food for her child. She had never had to work 2 jobs just to survive. She had never had to risk her safety to do the right thing. She realized that she had spent 15 years as a judge without truly understanding the lives of many people who appeared before her. She had been quick to judge but slow to understand. That night, Elizabeth could not eat her dinner. She kept thinking about Emma sitting in that small flat, probably worried about how she would pay the fine. She thought about little Lucy, who might have to go without new clothes because of a harsh penalty, for the first time in her career. Elizabeth questioned whether she had been truly serving justice or just following rules without compassion. The next morning, Judge Sterling woke up with a heavy heart. She had barely slept all night, thinking about Emma Johnson and the terrible mistake she had made. As she sat at her breakfast table, drinking her morning tea, she made a decision that would change both her life and Emma's forever. She could not undo her mistake, but she could try to make it right. Elizabeth knew what she had to do, even though it scared her more than anything she had ever done before. Elizabeth found Emma's address in the court records and drove through the busy London streets to Bermondsey. Her hands shook as she parked her car outside the small brick building. She had never done anything like this before. Judges did not usually visit the people they had sentenced. But Elizabeth knew this was different. She climbed the narrow stairs to Emma's flat and stood outside the door for a long moment, gathering her courage. Finally, she knocked softly. Emma opened the door, still wearing her blue hotel uniform from her morning shift. Her face showed complete surprise and worry when she saw Judge Sterling standing there. "Your Honor, is everything all right?" Emma asked, clearly confused about why the judge was at her home. Elizabeth took a deep breath before speaking. "Miss Johnson, may I speak with you? I am not here as a judge today. I am here as someone who owes you a very sincere apology." Emma hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let her in. The flat was even smaller than it had looked from outside, but it was warm and filled with love. The walls were covered with Lucy's school artwork, and books were stacked neatly in every available surface. Lucy sat at the tiny kitchen table, eating her breakfast before school. She was a beautiful little girl with bright eyes and a cheerful smile. "Lucy, this is Judge Sterling," Emma said gently to her daughter. "Say hello." Lucy looked up with curious eyes that sparkled with intelligence. "Hello." "Judge Sterling, Mommy says judges help people and make sure everyone is safe." Elizabeth's heart felt like it was breaking. This innocent child believed that judges were good people who helped others. "Hello, Lucy. Your mother is absolutely right. Judges should help people." Emma sent Lucy to get ready for school, then sat down across from Elizabeth at the small table. The space was so cramped that their knees almost touched. "Miss Johnson, Emma," Elizabeth began, her voice much softer than it had been in the courtroom. "I know about the threats against me. I know you are the witness who came forward. I know those phone calls in court yesterday were from Detective Thompson." Emma's eyes immediately filled with tears. "I am so sorry, Your Honor. I tried to explain what was happening, but I could not find the right words. I know how it must have looked to you." "No," Elizabeth said firmly, interrupting her. "I am the one who should apologize. I judged you without understanding your situation. I was cruel and unfair to you. You were trying to help save my life, and I punished you for it." Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I do not blame you, Your Honor. I know how it looked, from where you were sitting. I understand why you were angry, but you should blame me," Elizabeth said, her voice filled with shame. "I failed in my duty as a judge. I am supposed to seek truth and justice, not make assumptions based on appearances." They sat in silence for a moment, both women lost in their own thoughts. Then Elizabeth continued speaking. "I want to void your fine completely, all of it, and I want to pay for any costs you have had because of my mistake." Emma shook her head quickly. "I cannot take your money, Your Honor. That would not be right. Please, Call me Elizabeth, and yes, it would be right. It is the least I can do after what I put you through." Emma looked at her with surprise. No one had ever seen this vulnerable, human side of the stern judge before. "There is something else," Elizabeth continued. "I have learned about your volunteer work, your studies, your struggles as a single mother. I want to help you, but more than that, I want to understand. I want to be a better judge." Lucy came running back into the room, ready for school with her backpack and lunchbox. Emma kissed her goodbye and promised to pick her up later that afternoon. After Lucy left, the two women continued talking. Emma told Elizabeth about her dreams of becoming a nurse, about her fears as a single mother raising a child alone, about the courage it took to come forward as a witness against a dangerous man. Elizabeth shared her own story about how she had become disconnected from the real struggles of the people who appeared in her courtroom. She had forgotten that behind every case was a human being with hopes, fears, and challenges. Elizabeth said after a long pause, "Would you be willing to help me understand better? Not just about your case, but about the lives of people who come before judges like me." Emma looked surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, would you help me become a better judge? Help me see what I have been missing all these years?" Emma smiled for the first time since Elizabeth had arrived. "I would like that very much, Your Honor." Elizabeth. As Elizabeth prepared to leave, Emma said quietly, "Thank you for coming here today. No one has ever apologized to me like that before. Thank you for your courage," Elizabeth replied. In court and out of it, 3 months later, the London courthouse looked exactly the same from the outside. The same grey stone walls, the same tall windows, and the same heavy wooden doors welcomed people every day. But inside, things had changed in ways that no one could have imagined. Judge Elizabeth Sterling still sat behind her polished oak bench every morning, wearing her black robes and looking as serious as ever. But now she approached each case with a completely new understanding of the people who came before her. She had implemented a new policy in her courtroom that surprised everyone who worked there. Before imposing any penalty or fine, Elizabeth would ask about the defendant's personal circumstances and their ability to pay. She wanted to understand their situation before making her decision. Some of the other court workers thought this was strange at first, but they soon saw how much better it worked. Emma Johnson had successfully testified against William Carter, the dangerous man who had been threatening judges. Her courage in coming forward had not only saved Judge Sterling's life, but had also prevented potential harm to other judges across London. Carter was now in prison, and the courthouse was a safer place for everyone. The friendship between Elizabeth and Emma had grown stronger with each passing week. Every Tuesday evening, Elizabeth would drive to the community center in Bermondsey to join Emma in helping children learn to read. At first, the children were amazed to see a real judge in their neighborhood, but soon they simply saw her as Miss Elizabeth, another caring adult who wanted to help them succeed. Emma had received a scholarship to complete her nursing studies, much faster than she had ever hoped. The scholarship came with a glowing recommendation letter from Judge Sterling herself. Emma was now just 6 months away from graduating and achieving her lifelong dream of becoming a nurse. Lucy had new clothes and shoes for school, not because of charity, but because her mother's financial situation had genuinely improved. Emma had been offered a much better job at a local hospital, working in administration while she finished her nursing studies. The job paid more money and had better hours, which meant Emma could spend more time with Lucy. One quiet evening, as they were cleaning up the classroom after the reading program, Emma said to Elizabeth, "Do you know what I have learned from all this?" Elizabeth looked up from stacking the children's books. What is that? That sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead to the best changes we never expected, Emma said with a thoughtful smile. Elizabeth nodded slowly. I have learned that too. I thought I was a good judge before all this happened, but I was only following rules without thinking about the people behind them. Now I am trying to serve justice with real compassion. The two women had also started a special program called Understanding Justice. Elizabeth would visit schools and community centres across London to talk about the legal system in simple terms that everyone could understand. Emma would share her story of how courage and honesty had led to positive changes in both their lives. At Lucy's school, Elizabeth had become a regular visitor. She would read stories to the children and show them that judges were real people, too, people who cared deeply about their community and wanted to help make it better. The program had caught the attention of other judges throughout London. Soon, courts across the city were implementing similar approaches to understanding the people who appeared before them. The story of Judge Sterling and Emma Johnson had become a powerful example of how understanding and compassion could transform the entire justice system. 1 year after their first difficult meeting in the courtroom, Elizabeth and Emma stood together at Emma's nursing graduation ceremony. The large hall was filled with proud families celebrating their loved ones' achievements. As Emma walked across the stage in her cap and gown to receive her nursing diploma, Elizabeth felt more proud than she had ever felt about any of her own professional achievements. You did it, Elizabeth whispered as Emma returned to her seat, holding her diploma with shaking hands. We did it, Emma corrected her gently. We both learned and grew together. After the ceremony ended, Lucy came running up to both women, her face glowing with excitement. Miss Elizabeth, did you see my mummy graduate? She is going to be a real nurse now. I did see it, sweetheart. Your mummy is a true hero, Elizabeth said. Kneeling down to Lucy's level, Emma smiled and hugged them, both tightly. We are all heroes when we choose to understand each other instead of judging each other too quickly. As they walked out of the graduation ceremony together into the warm London evening, Elizabeth reflected on how completely her life had changed. She had learned that true justice was not just about punishment or following rules. It was about understanding, showing compassion, and giving people the chance to grow and change their lives. Emma had shown her that real courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to do what was right despite being afraid. Both women had discovered that the most meaningful and lasting relationships often come from the most unexpected circumstances. Their story had become proof that when people choose understanding over quick judgment, and when they have the courage to admit their mistakes and work to make things right, amazing transformations can happen that benefit everyone involved. As they parted ways that evening, both women knew that their unlikely friendship had changed them forever, and their story would continue to inspire others to choose compassion over judgment in their own lives.